This conference will now be recorded.
Verify attendance.
Okay. Trevor Dombach.
Here.
Tim Dugan.
Here.
Andrew Flagg. Not present. Brian Height.
Here.
Diane Kelly.
Here.
Mark Luth.
Here.
David Wilson.
Here.
Monica Hodges.
Here.
David Kennedy. Not present. Brad Osborne. Not present. Mike Walk. Not present.
All right. Meeting rules.
These meetings are intended to be Planning Commission workshops. The goal of these workshops is to complete the Planning Commission's PA-MPC duty, quote, to prepare the comprehensive plan for the development of the municipality as set forth in this Act, MPC, and present it to the Commissioner, for the consideration of the governing body, unquote. While it is the role of the Planning Commission to prepare the comprehensive plan, to do so without the input of the Board of Commissioners would ultimately reduce the chances of the Board of Commissioners approving the comprehensive plan. Therefore, any input provided by the Board of Commission members will be valuable moving forward with the drafting of the comprehensive plan. Please note this is a hybrid in-person remote meeting. All participants are welcome to verbally give comment during the designated portions of the meeting. For an orderly meeting wherein all attendees may be able to fully participate, we ask that you adhere to the following rules. Please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid background noise that may cause interference in the meeting and make it difficult for others to hear. Staff may mute the microphones of remote attendees if needed. Public questions and comments will be taken at periodic intervals throughout the agenda. We will start with no time limits, but the Planning Commission Chairman may impose a time limitation if there are many questions or if the meeting is running short on time. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand and be recognized, and then move to the podium when directed and state your name, address, and comment or question. Please turn the microphone off and on before and after speaking. For remote attendees, the chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address in the chat box, which is the speech balloon icon in the upper right. I believe it's square now. When you are recognized and so directed, please unmute your microphone, state your comment or question. Mute your microphone when done. For those who are accessing the meeting by phone only, staff will periodically ask for caller comments and unmute all callers. Callers must identify their name and address prior to making comment. Your cooperation and adherence with these rules will ensure an orderly and respectful meeting. Thank you.
And I forgot to introduce staff members and township consultants that are present. We have Hannah Clark from Michael Baker International. She's a planner. Greg Adams, township planner. Dave Manhart, director of community development. Chris Stroller, long range planner. Lynn Labar, permits and the minute taker. Chief Dorney, chief of police, and Herb Bender, interim township manager. All right, we're on agenda item number 3, approval of minutes. If anyone is online, the minutes are a written record of what's discussed in the meetings. Also, the recordings of these meetings are posted on the township website. So the township website has a lot of good information if anyone ever wants to check in on past meetings. So we'll start with the June 7th meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments or edits?
I have just one housekeeping under the members in attendance. David Wilson should be listed as the chairman of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
And I have a comment on the last page, minor typo. It said, Mr. Wilson said that we need to make it financially liable for the developer. It should say viable.
Again, another minor typo on that same page. Third paragraph down, last sentence, align should be ALIGN.
Anything else? All right. Motion to approve?
So moved. Oh, second.
Any opposed?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We have the June 16th meeting minutes as well. Any comments, edits?
I'll ask for the same correction on the front page under members in attendance. David Wilson should be signified as the chairman of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
All in favor?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Now we're on agenda item number 5, comprehensive plan goals and implementation. I'll hand it off to Dave Manhart.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce everybody to our new hire, Chris Stroller, he's hired as the long-range planner. The primary duties include helping us finish up this comprehensive plan. And then also on the implementation side, one of the things that's definitely coming out of this comprehensive plan is the focus on implementation. There's a lot of work that's going to be coming out of this comprehensive plan. So we have Chris on board to help us with that. Chris comes to us from Wildlands Conservancy. So he's got a lot of experience with grant writing, which we're going to use a lot of, and a lot of environmental planning, open space, riparian buffers, trail planning. So we're really excited to have Chris on board and wanted to introduce him to everyone tonight. So thank you, Chris.
Excited to meet all of you. Yeah, thank you. I have had the pleasure of working with the township a little bit in my previous role on things like the Jordan Creek Greenway. And I'm just really thrilled to be here at this time and seeing the comprehensive plan come to fruition. And it's a kind of nice guide to what will be happening in the next few years. So thank you.
Okay, so on to the meeting. One of the things, so we have the timeline. This is the timeline that Michael Baker prepared for us at the last meeting that I was unable to attend. I understand that there were some questions about timeline and deliverables. So I want to kind of get into that a little bit more. The way we structured these workshops was to focus on the Planning Commission having their opportunity to be involved and direct the drafting of the plan. So the way we set it up, and this is the way we set it up in the beginning, and it follows the agenda, was we were attacking it at sections at a time, where we would start with a review, get comment, and then we would present a draft. That draft of the goals and strategies and implementation becomes I refer to it as the meat and potatoes of the comprehensive plan. So that's really where, if there's comments or concerns with it, that's what should be commented on. And everything else will be built around that. So as we go through these meetings, we present the draft. So tonight at July's meeting, we'll present a housing draft and community facilities draft. And then these are, let me see if I can get out of this. The drafts are all placed on the website under departments, community development, comprehensive plan, working draft, update, which I didn't click. There it goes. So this is essentially the deliverable of the draft. So as we continue, and you can see community utilities the draft was presented at the last meeting. Tonight with the approval, and once everybody's okay with it, we post the housing and facilities by the end of the week. So this is the living document of the draft plan. The other thing I wanted to share is kind of how everything will be built out from that point. So we have a Word document, and this was the outline that we prepared. We have a document on teams that we're working on and filling in all the pieces. So here's an example of the goals and overarching goals and strategies. You may not be able to see that. Let me zoom in. Whoops, wrong button. So these sections where we present the draft, overarching goals and strategies as an example, we put those in the document, the draft document, and we build around those goals and strategies. So we'll include a basic narrative, background information, and then additional text or graphs or images around these goals and strategies, and then implementation as well. So that's how everything's coming together. So we haven't used the term approved, but as you okay these goals and strategies that we present, we post them on the website, and then we build around that. So the focus really is on these goals and strategies. If there's comments, this is what needs to be commented on. And we're very deliberate in going through this process of involving the Planning Commission and the BOC at this point, so that when we get to the end and we have a draft with all these little pieces filled in, it should move smoothly through the process. So I kind of wanted to take a step back and touch on that. Another thing is with regard to public engagement. We spent a big chunk of the process, I hate to say it, but the last 2 years, 3 years, 2.5 years, focusing on public engagement. And that public engagement was used to form the working groups. The working groups then made recommendations to the Planning Commission to put everything together. So the idea is the Planning Commission, through these workshops, puts together the plan, focusing on goals and strategies, implementation. And then once we build the plan, then we go back out to the public and present the draft plan. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of how this process has been rolled out. So just kind of wanted to take a step back and cover that. Any questions on that?
Thank you for providing that, because it's good to see the schedule, and we are on schedule. And in terms of if a resident comes in now and hasn't been able to keep up the past year or two, they can see that schedule. And then on the website, the issues and items we've discussed are on the website, so they can bring themselves up to speed. So I think it's important that, like you're doing, we communicate that on the township website.
Thank you. So here we are, and this is the slide as we move forward, we're graying things out and just focusing on the next topic. So tonight we have a draft for you to review of the housing and community facilities, and then we'll move on to transportation. And then after transportation is really kind of the big one is going to be the land use. That's kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, where we put everything, all of these recommendations together. So kind of think of it as a funnel. So we have all these broad recommendations and it culminates with that land use plan. So when we get to that at the next meeting, is really kind of, we have some mapping prepared and we'll kind of go over some ideas to review with you for that. And then we also brought in modeling. So after that land use plan is where we create the inputs for the models. The models are already prepared. So all we have to do is prepare new inputs for those models. That gets conducted during that land use plan phase and then prior to the draft. If we need to make tweaks based on those models, we should have enough time baked in there so that we can make some tweaks and review it with the boards if we need to. And then that gets us to a draft comprehensive plan. So individual meeting flow, we have the public comment review. Review is the synthesized goals, strategies. We've kind of gotten away from objectives and started using the term strategies. And then we have an open comment period with looking for that approval to post things to the website and start building around these individual goals and strategies. Public comment review. We do have a new comment from Marie for resource protection. I'm going to have to go back and dig into it. But we can talk about that with the resource protection. It was kind of clarifying a point, so we can get back to that. The big one for tonight is the comment. Mr. Spiegel prepared a very well-written document, a letter talking about the 309 corridor, and we can kind of talk to that when we get into the transportation section. So we'll move on to the review of goals, strategies, and implementations. So all of this is built from the comments that we have at the meetings and the 2009 and all of those inputs. The overall goal for housing: maintain and strengthen the identity of South Whitehall Township neighborhoods, provide a variety of housing and neighborhood choices that meet the needs of all generations with consideration of family sizes, abilities, and income levels. So this was built out of the overall goals and strategies. We came up with those overall goals and strategies for each section, and then a lot of the comments from the last meeting. The concept of the neighborhoods was a strong opinion or strong idea, so that's something that we wanted to bake into the goal. We comment on that or just go right into strategies? Okay. So strategies, replicate successes of established South Whitehall Township neighborhoods in terms of design, character, and connectivity. Encourage densities and scale where capacity and impacts can be absorbed to the greatest extent. New development should provide housing types that build upon housing choice and affordability of South Whitehall Township. New development should maintain scale and character of surrounding neighborhoods, incentivize innovative housing strategies that respond to market demands, allow density credits to be applied to adaptive reuse. These were all kind of discussed at some point during that meeting. So I think we can, any comments on the goals or strategies? Yeah. One of the things that we had been doing for other sections of the plan is we had call outs. So for this one, we didn't have any and we didn't really discuss any. So if there's any ideas on things that we should highlight or talk about in the comprehensive plan as a call out, important topics or things that the boards are concerned about or things that we should focus on.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate category. I know we've discussed design standards or keep consistency with adjoining neighborhoods. I don't know if this is the proper category for it.
I think it is. We can do a call out that talks about design standards and how that could actually be an implementation item. And I think it actually might be, but we can talk about it as a call out and highlight that.
And does that meld also with, we had discussions about street trees and maintaining, that fit here since it's housing also, neighborhoods?
I think it definitely fits within design standards.
Okay.
And that might be why it is more appropriate as a call out, because then we can talk about some of the other elements of design, including streetscape and things like that.
Including sidewalks and
Yes.
connectivity.
Sidewalks, street furniture, street lights, street trees.
Thank you.
With implementation, a lot of the working group recommendations are implementable. So most of those working group recommendations get baked into the implementation plan. What we'll do, and it may have been a while since you opened up the workbooks, but there is a worksheet or information sheet for each recommendation that's built out that talks about possible funding sources, objectives, partners. So that's what will be built out when we get to the implementation plan, where each of these implementation items will have a page or a section that we can pull out and reference when Chris starts working on the implementation of so I think outside of the working group, we have the density credits applied to adaptive reuse. The concept of adaptive reuse we talked about in the historic resources. Maintaining historic buildings, it's best if something is in those buildings. When they're vacant, they usually fall into disrepair. So encouraging people to reuse those structures. And then the last item on that list is develop planning area-based design guidelines. One of the things we've been talking about and has been coming out of this is the idea of planning areas, which is tied to the neighborhoods. Greenewalds is different than Citronia, which is different than the Jordan Valley. So, one design concept for Greenewalds may not be appropriate in the Jordan Valley, or I forgot what some of the other ones we had, Citronia. So that's something that will come up during the land use discussion. We'll kind of have some of those planning areas designated. So any comments on that?
I do have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
How exactly is adaptive reuse encouraged?
So one of the things we can do is with adaptive reuse could allow, just an example, the zoning could allow for additional uses if it's an adaptive reuse. So a historic building in a residential zone, and this is just concept right now, a historic building in a residential zone may be able to have a home-based business of some sort, a service business. Whereas a non-historic structure may not have that opportunity. And those are things that we have to kind of build into it.
Would you also include historic residential structures as well? If there was a way to offer those to have maybe a home-based business to keep the character of an older home if it was in good condition?
Yes, that is in fact one of the things we have now in our historic resource ordinance. As long as it is somehow designated a historic resource, either many ways. Obviously, it can be on the National Registry, or you as a board can designate it as a historic resource. That opens it up for some of the incentives that are provided by the historic resource ordinance at this time. We'd probably expand on it even more. Right now, it's fairly limited, but it does allow, for example, what is traditionally considered a residential dwelling to have some commercial components to it. We have bed and breakfast as a possibility, an art gallery, there's something along those lines that would work within what we would consider be the existing neighborhood. It wouldn't be out of character of that neighborhood. So one of the things we'd like to do is expand that, look at character areas, the neighborhood areas that we're looking at, see what makes sense in those, and then offer up those as incentives.
Use, there's shift out of retail. Retail's getting killed with e-commerce, and not maybe just they're looking into the future. Let's just say the hotel business, future pandemics, and these things sort of wipe out the idea of someone staying in a hotel anymore. So now you have Hamilton Boulevard where you have multiple hotels, and that maybe a reuse for those hotels for a developer would be to convert to a residential apartment complex. So it's not just, I want to ask if it could be something other than what we're talking about with taking a historic building, making a bed and breakfast. They should think about the possibility that we're going to have a lot of vacant either retail facilities in the valley or hotels, medical. I mean, at some point, I think we got a little saturated in medical as well. And of course, need for office space has dwindled a little bit in the western Lehigh Valley due to downtown Allentown and some of the new office space at discounted prices. So something that I think we can go both ways, commercial, another reuse.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we've been talking about, because there are a number of areas that we feel are ripe for mixed use, change of use. Obviously, some of the commercial centers, we're looking at improving them. And rather than going the traditional way of strictly commercial is permitted there, a little incentive to be creative with your reuses. So yeah, we're definitely looking at that as well.
And I was just going to add that could be an interesting application of TDR, transfer development rights, as well, with some of these areas that may shift in terms of how they function if it's going from office park to mixed use that has some apartments or things like
So I think the reuse and utilization of some of these properties that may not be at the use that they were intended because of changes in economics and society, that allowing opportunity for people to reuse it is very important and something that we've been talking about, like I said, and I think some of it will come up when we start talking about land use and planning areas. But a lot of it also, it gets implemented through zoning is really where the rubber will meet the road, where that's concerned. So it kind of seems like we're okay with our housing goal and strategies, so we can post that by the end of the week. And also with the working draft, we also have the comment form, which will also be built out. And one of the things when we get into public engagement, we'll talk about when we're going to push for those comments a lot harder, kind of when everything's wrapped up. But we'll get into that kind of near the end.
Dave, can I ask one more question?
Yep.
When we're speaking about reuse of non-residential, if it was to be rejuvenated for another business, is this something that we could add in to utilize, for example, the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation, the EDC, to partner with us to help promote, to bring new businesses into the township? We've got multiple businesses that have been empty for a while. Not too many, but is there a way to partner with them to help attract, to promote reuse?
Yes, absolutely. And one of as we were putting together the outline, the draft document, one of the concepts that came up that we haven't really talked about, and we'll have to figure out how best to put it in, but the idea of economic development, to actively pursue businesses and encourage businesses to locate in South Whitehall, is something that we've kind of kicked around, but it would be something that we could put into the comprehensive plan. So that's something to start thinking about. And, I don't know if it's going to be, it would be its own chapter or maybe a call out or something along those lines. But the idea of, like you said, partnering with Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corp. To get some of these vacant businesses at least on their list, and actively pursue businesses. And I'm volunteering right now to go recruit breweries. So, so yeah, it's something that I'm glad you brought it up, and we can certainly work that into the plan.
Okay, moving forward to community facilities. So after the June 16th meeting, we talked about community facilities, and these are the syntheses. These are the syntheses that we devised out of that. So the overall goal, community facilities promote an effective continuation of opportunities, facilities, and services for parks, recreation, education, public safety, and wellness. So that's the overall goal there. Any comments on that? Okay. Moving along to strategies, we're looking at evaluating opportunities to acquire land for community facilities and to continually evaluate future needs for community facilities. Those are the two strategies. And we did hear loud and clear, we want to break that up, emergency services, splitting from parks and rec as the two main categories. So the strategies that follow kind of reflect that. And the next page shows the 9 different strategies. that we synthesized out of that. And then, of course, the implementations that follow. So basically, does anybody have any questions? They want any clarification from any of the particular strategies?
What's BOE?
Board of Ed. Parkland School District.
I think it should be spelled out at least once and then parenthesized. And
I think that's it's an agreement that deals with the maintenance. It kind of came up at a staff level, but we can, like, these implementations will have a sheet with them that describes it in a little more detail. So we wanted to put it on here, and when we get into implementation, we'll have more information that talks about that and more background.
it's also like a baseball field or a softball field that's adapted for people with disabilities. They can use it as well. And the school district will maintain that to keep those opportunities available. I think the one by the former Troxel School, well, it's still there, but not active, has one of those built in. I think that's where it is, but I didn't know what BOE is.
Yeah, during this, we're using shorthand as much as we can. When it comes to the plan, we'll definitely spell things out.
Or school board, and like, we don't think of Parkland School District as a board of education. So it's like either the school district or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just Dave's New Jersey roots showing through here.
It is my New Jersey roots.
Lee
showing
Sparta
through.
behind, and you're in the Lehigh Valley now, so.
Those were my formative years.
Understood.
Yeah, I always think of it as Parkland. To me, there's only one school district, and that's Parkland. So
I have a question on the strategies. Evaluate opportunities to acquire land for community facilities. Is that something that we also can break out for each development that might come in to have singularly looking at a large development to have facilities that might be open to the public? For open space and trails and that sort of thing.
that's actually part of the review process now. Saldo does require at least open space dedication or fees in lieu of. And obviously for larger ones, we do try to go for the dedication. I know recently we've been trying to not have the township take over the fiscal maintenance of the parks and rec, but we have been fairly successful about getting HOAs to do that and leave them, have all the recreation facilities open to the township as a whole. So that's baked in right now. Certainly we can reevaluate Saldo to see if things beyond park and rec can be included. Obviously, we heard loud and clear that we'd like to see emergency facilities be available for that. So we'll take a look at that, see what we can get in, because basically the state allows us to do it for open space. I'm not familiar with anything other than open space, unless you're talking like a PRD, planned residential development, something like that. But it's certainly something we can look into and add in where we can.
Yeah, I've seen in some municipalities where there's a large piece of land and the developer dedicates a piece of land to be park, and they actually build the park and turn it over to the municipality, but there's an agreement that they will still maintain that park to make sure it's still functioning and operating with the ability of the township to come in if needed and or maintenance. That would be a good opportunity.
Yeah,
Something
Yeah, I would
nice
agree.
for the township too.
It's something similar to what we have now. We like to ensure that whatever entity is maintaining that has the strength to stay around a while. If it's just a developer himself or something like that, it's easy to duck out and then we're left with it. HOAs, the school district, Wildlands Conservancy, stuff like that, which are already baked into the SALDO regs, they're long lasting. So we have less concerns with turning it over to them. But you've got a good point. So.
I have a question about strategies as well for community facilities. Where exactly does it fit in where we could potentially ask a developer to donate a piece of emergency equipment or, donate a fire engine or donate it, something that's needed because of the density of the development that's coming? Where would that fit in under strategies?
So during this conversation, it sparked an idea is with the fiscal impact model, he has some emergency services built into that. So if we can develop and we'll kind of probably try and add or build on these, where if we can have that model evaluate the future development and it becomes apparent through that model that we're going to need more police officers or a substation or something else, that would trigger the conversation. And I'm not sure how that would work as far as the mechanism, but the model does provide that ability for us to evaluate. So I think using these two strategies in conjunction with that model will give us the information to help make those decisions moving forward.
I don't know if our
Yeah.
attorney's not here, but I don't think it's legal to ask.
And that was
Any developer.
what I was
or
about to
any-
say.
You have fees already established in your recreation fees
Mhm.
and your traffic impact fees. Whether you decide to use the recreation fees, that 5% of the recreation fee could be used towards emergency equipment, but South Whitehall doesn't own its own fire station, so, correct? They're all volunteer?
They're all volunteer, but we do provide equipment.
So it could be something where portion of your recreation fee could maybe be, I don't even know how that works.
Ooh.
It gets a tricky slope when you start asking.
And that's exactly, right now we're broad brush, and when we get down to details is when we start looking at legal, what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I was kind of dancing around it.
Yeah, and sort of we're spitballing some ideas here. Maybe in a case where not appropriate to dedicate land, maybe in lieu of that, fire trucker funds for the township to procure needed equipment. Obviously, there's a lot of legalities behind it, but
Yeah, the MPC is fairly straightforward on what you can use open space fees for. So that would have been my point is we will have to adhere with what the state law allows us to do. Certainly we can't, if the state law does not allow us to say, hey, for every house you have to donate $10,000 toward emergency services, then we can't do it. So we will have to look at that. However, as Mark said, I think you were incorrect. We can ask. And
They can also
say no.
They can also say,
Yes,
hey, look, if you do this, I'll get you a $250,000 fire truck. But
Yeah.
asking for it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. There's a difference between asking for and requiring. And we can certainly negotiate anything. And we have successfully negotiated for a few things with developers that we could not require of them. Obviously, a developer does want to live in a community where they can be well served by traffic, by open space, by emergency services. And if this is brought to their attention that, well, maybe, we might need a fire engine to better serve your new community, they might be willing to provide that or at least assist. So as Dave said, it opens the conversation.
And some of the other states are there's a concept called concurrency that basically if the development it's apparent that they need a firehouse, they they're required to construct. The Pennsylvania MPC is not that. So we have to work within what's allowable by law. So, we'll certainly pursue it and look and see how far we can go with it. But yeah, it's definitely tricky, slippery slope for sure.
I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I think this is where the give and take and working with a developer is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Negotiation is always welcomed, as long as we stay within the bounds of the law. Any more questions on our strategies or implementation?
Could you expand on, I know this is broad brush, like you said, but increasing volunteerism through the township? On implementation.
Is that in
Next.
the
Middle of implementation.
implementation? Increased volunteers. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head right now, but that's one of the things that I think it came out of working groups, and definitely in conversations. And how we do that, I don't know, but I think at least putting the information out of what's available, vacancies on the different boards and commissions and things like that. So it's really more of a informational item.
I would say maybe make it implementable, maybe wordsmith that a little bit. Because the way it reads right now, it's like, this is what we're going to do. Whereas it may be more of a.
That's very
advocate.
aspirational
Yeah.
to increase volunteerism.
Yeah.
Create
You will
awareness.
volunteer.
Create awareness that we have a volunteer fire department. I know residents that think it's a paid professional. They're professional, but they're not paid. So,
Yeah, and I think it's, I think the almost listing or cataloging the volunteer opportunities is a huge step.
Yeah, this did come out of the last meeting. We had a fairly good conversation about volunteerism. And certainly, even forming a committee of all the volunteer organizations here so they can all pool ideas and resources to see how we can expand our available pool of township volunteers would be an implementation strategy. So, any other comments?
I think just a quick note on increasing volunteerism. I do think the township lacks social media presence in terms of outreach. We have a website, that's great, but speaking from someone who, looks at social media, I know some Parks and Rec here at the township, they have a social media. The overall township does not.
I was just saying, like Instagram, I think follow the Parks and Rec, I follow the police department. And but whoever puts out, like with the concerts are going to be in the park at 7:00 on Friday night, and those kind of, even a blast out that says, hey, we're looking for volunteers for that event, or we're looking for a volunteer fireman. It's out there. I think it's actually pretty good.
We are looking into a program called Nixle, which will help us with that, which will link to all those accounts and get to all the residents right away as soon as we hit the button.
Great.
So we will get that up and running hopefully this year yet. We just had a meeting today with them, but we are in the process of working on something to improve that already.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I just had a question on the last item for implementation, evaluate staffing levels to coordinate with service expectations. So do we want to say specifically for emergency services there, or that's a pretty broad statement in itself?
And I think that applies to all township facilities. because obviously you have to have your staffing level, community development, public works, police, all kind of being consistent with what the expectations of what that staff is to provide. So if we're asking a lot of our police, but not giving them the staff to do so, that's when, expectations aren't going to meet staffing levels. So we have to look at that, like I said, across the board. And I believe that's what, we didn't leave it to just emergency services because it does apply for all township. So,
Township.
yep, township-wide.
Were there any thoughts on callouts for this section? I don't know if we had any examples, but anything related to community facilities for specific callouts to include in the plan?
So something just to suggest for consideration would be in the last meeting when we were talking about community facilities was a third-party evaluation of capacity and service levels. I think that was something, I think in at least the realm of emergency services that was of interest, as well as potentially thinking about the application of almost a capital improvements plan that could be applied to emergency services as well as to community facilities. And not that it would have to be separate from the capital improvements plan, but just understanding where you are today and planning for future needs. And I think some of those concepts, if the commissioners felt it was of interest, we could maybe call out here because I think they were pretty salient points that came out.
Is that different than under implementation? Both of those items are somewhat addressed. I didn't know if are you asking for something beyond, suggesting something beyond that?
I guess I was just thinking if it could be explained a bit further, maybe, or built out, but it does not need to show up more than once if we just have it here. It's just top of mind, so sorry.
Yeah, I think we're viewing a call out as something that is less an implementable item as something that explains a trend or a concept, gives a little more background to it. I think one of the classic ones was we're looking at call out to highlight the changes in the agriculture industry over the last 20 to 30 years. It's not so much an implementable, but it gives the reader background information that allows them to understand better some of the implementation items. So that's kind of what we're looking for in a call out.
Thank you.
Any other comments on community facilities? I know this was a hot topic for the last meeting, and I'm pleased to see that we're getting more feedback on it. So. Okay. Shall we move forward to transportation?
Yes. So next element is transportation, and got a thumbs up that we're doing good on time. So we'll review goals and objectives, and then we'll go into comment. One of the things that we have is Jeopardy. And it's not letting me out. There we go. So one of the things that we want to do is kind of, there's some, one of the things that there's some broad topics and ideas that we want to make sure everybody's on the same page as we begin these discussions. So we came up with a few questions.
I would love to read the questions. Sure. Okay. Oh, yeah, exactly. We
Yeah,
are
there you
reading.
go.
Yes. So for transportation jeopardy, and feel free to just call out, and anyone online, please feel free to unmute yourself and answer if you, or tell us the question. So for $100, the first answer is, this entity has the ability to mandate off-site road improvements for new developments. So we're looking for the entity. Yes.
PennDOT.
What is PennDOT we were actually looking for,
Oh.
but it's the,
What is PennDOT?
yes, I think you're good there, so. Correct, PennDOT has the ability to require off-site improvements. So next answer, for 200, this entity can only require frontage improvements related to new development, such as traffic signals, turn lanes, and roads. Which entity can only require frontage improvements? Yes.
What is the municipality?
Correct. Wow,
Like one
2
more
for
piece.
2.
All right.
Kids are going to be happy when he gets home.
For 300. This is the authorization to complete projects within the PennDOT right-of-way, including the installation of curbs, sidewalks, and driveways. This is the actual authorization we're looking for. Yes, Mr. Dugan.
Okay. An HOP?
Correct. What is a highway occupancy permit? HOP. Yeah. All right.
There you go.
Yeah, Lynn, you can be on the bell
Lynn's been
there.
waiting for
They're getting harder. For $400. This is the federally regulated 4-year plan that is updated every 2 years to fund transportation projects in Lehigh and Northampton counties.
Brian allowed to answer that.
Brian's excluded from this one.
Transportation improvement.
Correct. Otherwise known as the TIP. For $500. This is the organization responsible for updating the long-range transportation plan and administering the transportation improvement plan.
Brian has to answer that one.
What is the Lehigh Valley Transportation Study or the Metropolitan Planning Organization?
Correct. And we've included the acronyms there. We often love to use acronyms whenever we can. So
It's great when an acronym has 2 different meanings.
yeah. For 600. This is the enabling legislation that allows municipalities to impose a transportation impact fee to support municipal capital projects.
That's Act 209.
Correct. Excellent. For $700. This is the federally designated funding program to support the development of alternative transportation facilities, including bike and pedestrian facilities, trails, safe routes to school, access to public transit, and so on. What is the funding program?
It used to be TAP, but now it's TACIT, a Transportation Alternative Set Aside.
Correct. We would have accepted TAP, but and for 800, another funding question. This is the state designated funding program to improve transportation assets that enhance communities, pedestrian safety, and transit revitalization. State designated funding.
Trouble if Brian doesn't know.
Anyone online want to try to answer?
Didn't read that quick enough.
No one online.
You read it.
Interesting. What is the multimodal
Oh.
transportation fund? I think that's it. Excellent job.
So one of the reasons we wanted to cover this is to get everybody thinking about the jurisdictional limitations, what a municipality can do, what a PennDOT can do, how, and then the funding mechanisms behind transportation projects. So these are all concepts and ideas that will help with the comp plan and how best to kind of organize future development and the growth of the township. So we handed out all of the working group recommendations that was sent in your packets. There's quite a bit of them, so I'm not going to kind of read them all. But if we can go around the room and get top 3 priorities, that would be great. So I think we'll start over here with Trevor.
I guess for me, I like the multi-municipal planning, planning with adjacent townships. That's probably a good one. Strongly considering traffic impact fees. Make sure we have our projects in the tip. I'd have more of a question, but what is the thought behind more frequent updates to the comprehensive plan? That just kind of check-ins throughout the next decade or so?
Yeah. One of the things, and it's come up, I think it was an implementation item in other sections, but the idea of having those periodic reports on the comprehensive plan, what's been done, what hasn't, if something hasn't been done, why hasn't it been done? So we've talked about the idea of a reexamination report, which is something that they do in New Jersey. But it allows the municipality and the governing body, so the planning commission would create the report and then recommend it or hand it off to the BOC, so that you have an idea of if there's a topic that requires something to be looked at. If there's a global pandemic and hotels are going out of business, there's an opportunity to react quicker than waiting for 10 years to update your comp plan. So that's the intent behind it. And then also status updates on implementation items.
Are we planning on putting a schedule or timeline in place? Is it a once a year, a 2, 5, 7, 10?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, I think we were bouncing between 1 and 2 years. Planning Commission does an annual report. So the idea was we could put in a section of the annual report that talks to it. Or if we want it to be more of a standalone report, then we could do it every 2 years. Because the other piece of it is, and we'll have to look at the implementation items once we get it all together. If a lot of the implementation items are multi-year, then it might make more sense to do every other year as opposed to an annual report, because you might not have much to report. So it's up for discussion.
No, it makes sense. Thanks. That's all I have then.
We'll move down the line, Mark.
I tend to get a little skeptical or nervous when we talk about amending a zoning map. So traffic-related intensity of permitted uses is appropriate to the existing and planned transportation network. I think that can also get a little dicey when you're changing current zoning on someone to a different zoning because you feel that there may or may not be a traffic issue, even if it's a traffic issue now. I mean, I certainly think the township would have the right to do it, but then that also owner might have the right to sue the township. And what they could consider a land grab, certainly especially when you have PennDOT roads that might front a bunch. I'll just say, for example, Jarris. It's got PennDOT is Cedar Crest Boulevard and Montjuic Road, so for the township to amend its zoning, one way or the other, whether it could become stricter or less restrictive. Using traffic as a catalyst. I think in some cases, not just that, but other properties. I mean, I know you have to plan for it.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons we brought up the jurisdiction is looking at the entity that can require improvements for future traffic impacts. If there's an existing issue, we either address it, or if it's a PennDOT road, they can address it, but then it typically goes through the tip. A lot of improvements are a result of development.
Mhm.
So for example, Ridge Farm, that section of Cedar Crest is getting redone. That section of Walbert is getting redone because of the development. So that's something to consider when we start looking at zoning and future land use, is where can improvements be made as part of development? Where does it make sense for those improvements to be made? Are kind of why we brought up that jurisdiction question.
So do you have any you like?
I'm sorry?
So do you have any of those that you would like?
I think that maybe an additional update here or there, like you said, just to be able to be reactive, is a good one. The traffic impact fee, you wouldn't be the first township to do it. It's expensive to implement it. I guess it would just come down to what kind of funding you'd need, because and you got to pick the intersections and you got to pick the areas, or you do it whole South Whitehall wide, which I guess you can or cannot do. I don't remember how that works, but generally you pick 5, 6, 12 intersections, and anything within a certain geographical distance from those intersections is subject to a traffic impact fee. But it's a lot of studying, it's a lot of engineering, it's a lot of paperwork. I mean, ultimately it pays for itself, but it's the upfront cost. I mean, it's not a horrible idea. Again, he wouldn't be the first one to have it. Other than that, I have no more comments on them.
Brian?
They all have merit in their own ways. I always focus on safety. So identify safety areas and high crash areas to address, improve. And then some of those improvements could be to prepare and get our projects on the tip. But the first step in getting projects on the tip is the long-range transportation plan. And that starts with the call for projects, which will be coming up in about 18 months, if not a year, depending on staff at my work. And then I'm always a fan of the capital improvements plan. It shows what money we have to go down the road. And it helps with budgeting and just helps create on our own roads. Those are my top 3, but they all have merit in their own ways. And I agree with Mr. Luth that Act 209 can be hard to implement. It's a lot of study. I know the township went down this road about 20 years ago, and the Pidcock company was like, this is how much it was going to cost, and it was a big 6-digit number. So
You could put it out for bid too, I guess.
I
You
don't
don't
know.
have to use the township engineer for a traffic impact study. So if the time ever arose, you could say, put out an RFP for it.
I know my work is creating a workshop on 209s for the fall and the summer fall time. I really don't know much. That's the people. I get to pick my own projects, so it helps. Seniority helps a little bit.
And I guess ultimately, traffic impact fee goes to a fund, and that fund is used for areas of safety concerns and our, our own maintenance to our roads and problem intersections.
But then you also lose some of the leverage of getting the frontage improvements, because then they're putting money instead of the frontage improvements, they're putting it into a fund. And sometimes they can build stuff cheaper than the township because we got prevailing wage and all this. You got to put it out for bid, and then sometimes you get an Eck Road situation. You know who's building what and leave. And sorry, I'll stop my commentary, but there are benefits and there are disadvantages. So
Sure.
Sure. Upper Macungie has one. I think Whitehall has one. So.
Right, my top items, I like to have a plan in place so we know what we can do, what we can't do, and if you don't have a plan, it's tough to move forward. So one key item I think is the capital improvements plan. A small example is I'm on my HOA, Vistas at Green Hills. We have 330 units, and we have a lot of private roads. So we got an engineer to inventory everything, all the roads, the storm sewer and whatnot, and put together a list of those items and list out the conditions and the cost to repair it in the future and to perform maintenance. And we've recoded our private roads. We've restriped it this year. We're going to have the storm sewer video camera inspected. So I know township engineers, they do that for municipalities on a larger scale. And it's something good for the residents to know that, oh, the township's looked at my road and it's in a plan now. If there's funding for it or not, that's another conversation. But at least the township can say, we've looked at it. Unfortunately, we just don't have the funding, or we do have the funding, and a couple of years it's scheduled to be improved. So that's one item. And piggybacking on the plan, having a plan, the transportation plan for the township and an official map showing connections and, getting that on paper. So when developers do come in, they are aware of any township improvements that township would like.
And that official map starts a clock where you can negotiate. That's why I was excited. One of the first things we did when I got on this board was adopt one.
And if we have that official map, does that, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but does that help with, LTAP and TIP and?
Well, LTAP is a little different. That's more of an education. Those are PennDOT engineers that come out and help. Like with we came out to River Road for the shared path for the Jordan Greenway. It's more design. It's PennDOT. It's free advice from engineers because they're all over the state. But it can help with other aspects of this, transportation connectivity. I mean, there's a lot of examples of what not to do in this township, and there's a lot of things of what to do. Or, and also, I always look at Wegmans. That's in the city of Allentown, but you cannot get to Citronia from Wegmans. You got to go all the way out to Tillman, and wouldn't it be great for the residents of Citronia to be able to get to Wegmans without hitting Tillman Street? So there's a lot of aspects to putting stub streets on our official map to the next municipality. and getting some synergy with, our neighbors, especially if it's vacant land or if they have a stub street. Hey, let's make sure it connects. We have a lot of stub streets, some in your neighborhood that
Yeah.
I don't think will ever be built because it goes
Steep-
down
there's
a
some
hill.
steep slopes.
But you
Yeah.
never know. Technology,
Yeah.
flying cars, who knows?
So basically, the plan, so to have it on paper, so to provide us and developers some.
I guess let's fit it, we're almost done with the board, and then we'll get into the chat.
So I have a couple questions that maybe follow into this. So through the township, when we look at our transportation infrastructure, PennDOT owned and maintained, township owned and maintained, and what extent is county or private? Private falls into the HOA, so I'm not as concerned about that. But there's infrastructure that's county owned as well, correct?
Bridges. They own the covered bridges.
Just those?
In this municipality, I think that's it.
I think I'm thinking out to other townships.
They own some bridges in Allentown, but they do not own any roads per se. They own bridges. They have a whole bridge
So-
department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in alignment with that, then how current are we as the township? And then looking over to PennDOT on their road studies and postings, as well as inventory of the infrastructure. Aging infrastructure is a major issue. It's always going to, comes with a hefty price tag. But are we up to date, like on our own township road studies and plans?
I know a couple of years ago we did inspections of all our township bridges under 20 feet. Over 20 feet, they're required. PennDOT does them because it's such a vast span. Under 20 feet doesn't necessarily have to be inspected unless it's a state route, then it's 8 feet. I know the township did a lot of them, or all of them, a couple of years ago. Time frame, but it was at least 5 years ago. No.
When I first got here, there was problems with, and I forget which bridge, one of our bridges, that we had to close and repair.
Right.
And that's when
They
the
did
question came up, where are our other bridges?
And where are our inspection records? And
I
there was
think
none.
Pitcock went out and followed up and took a look at all of them.
So
I'm pretty sure, but I was
And
kind
then
of,
PennDOT, in fact, one of the bridges will be replaced shortly, is the one down by the reopened Worley's Market.
Mhm.
On that one's being replaced. And the last big bridge in South Whitehall, bordering the city of Allentown, was at Cedar Crest and Parkway.
Oh yeah, that
Bridge.
So this kind of leads into my first priority item on there would be number 4. And like Trevor pointed out, multi-municipal planning, because ensuring, with the increase of traffic and the weight of traffic, density, volume, I should say, making sure that our infrastructure is current and evaluated, posted correctly, because we have to look at the impact of the heavy trucking and hauling, even just increased volume coming from neighboring municipalities with increased development. All those have impacts, on the long-term viability of our transportation infrastructure. So if you wanted my quick priorities, 4, 1, and 6, I think are tagged together, and 3. And last, 2 other points that I think about in this realm is one of my pet peeves, roads infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. It's engineered, it's designed, it's built. It doesn't get maintained, especially stormwater infrastructure. It's hard to do, understand, because you have to stop traffic to maintain the stormwater infrastructure underneath. But it's something that I see as an issue in a lot of places. When there's trees and plants growing out of storm drains, that the capacity, the engineered capacity is no longer there. And that creates roadway hazards in all seasons of the year. So that also tags again to looking at safety and safety issues on our roads. So I would suggest if there's a way to leverage onto PennDOT, try to get them to continue to maintain.
PennDOT typically leverages us to maintain, but yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, our District 5 is 6 counties, so
6 very busy counties.
growing counties. And I must say our township roads I've seen our municipal staff out there pulling up the storm grates before one of the big storms, which we haven't had one in a while, but you don't see that on the PennDOT roads. So.
So we kind of talked about stormwater and utilities. State has all kinds of regs now that we have to follow and that talk to maintenance and there's like vacuuming of the inlets, and so there's a whole new
Unfunded mandates.
there's a lot of unfunded mandates with regards
Those
to
are always fun.
stormwater. Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you all for the comments so far. They're excellent, and I don't want to be repetitive. They're all wonderful, and I think emphasize everything that we've heard so far tonight. The official map, I think, is very important. We already have one. I don't want to count it as one of mine because we need to update it as part of the comp plan, but it goes without saying for me that have a vision and a plan for what we want to do and then how do we get there. So my first one would be number 10, to create and implement a capital improvements plan. We need to understand what it's going to require from the township's perspective, or how much revenue and how are we going to do that over the next 10 years to have a strategic plan to implement, to support the developments that are currently being built and those that we will see in the next 10 years. I also agree multi-municipal planning is something that I don't believe we've looked at very much as a township. I think that we should certainly explore it to analyze what benefits we could have, as others have said, with our local municipalities, our neighbors. Mention warehouses again, but they're coming up all around us. They impact our township. If there's a way to work with our local municipalities to come up with a plan with them, we all work together. The boundaries are not really there when you get right down to it. And I appreciate the conversation tonight we've had about Act 209 traffic impact fees. I don't know that we need to spend 6 figures to get it started. I think it's something that we should, again, analyze to see what would it cost, what benefits would it have, so that we can make an educated decision of whether or not it makes sense to invest in that the return on a program like that would actually have a benefit for our residents, our businesses, and our township taxpayers. Would be my top 3.
Okay. My number 1 was to identify the safety areas and the high crash areas. I'm always big on safety, but a lot of these look towards the future, and that's really important, but we also have to take care of what we have now in the present. So I think it's important to identify those areas and make sure they're addressed. The second one, I think it's really important to involve multi-municipalities, because no matter what goes where in our surrounding municipalities, it's all going to affect us and them. So I think we need to work together with that. And the third one is the capital improvements. Be able to afford what we need to do. And I think all of them have merit and importance. And those are my three. So.
Great, thank you. Now, working backwards.
Do you want to go to the chat?
Oh, yes, let's go to the track. You're up.
So we have a comment from David Burke, 1436 Buck Trail Road. And his comment is a comment on the traffic study done as part of this effort and the idea of coordinating future land use to road networks and the ability to absorb change. David,
Yes,
if
I'd
you are able to, if you want to expand on your comment.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was part of the working group that came up with these recommendations. And essentially, I'm talking about number 2 there. Amend zoning map so traffic-related intensity of permitted uses is appropriate to the existing and planned transportation network. I think if you look at that item and you look at the traffic study that the township commissioned Keystone Engineering to do as part of this study, the 2040 base traffic condition for Cedar Crest Boulevard shows 15 intersections. 55% of those are congested or worse. They're all F, G, and H. So we see a lot of congestion just with the base traffic conditions in the future. And if you look at their traffic study for 2040 future traffic conditions, 93% of those 15 intersections they studied on Cedar Crest Boulevard are overcapacity and extended congestion. They're labeled H, which is the highest labeling in terms of traffic interference. And that's at an overcapacity of greater than 110% capacity. So I don't know how you can ignore that second item there and not find a way to deal with it. Essentially, their traffic study is saying that Cedar Crest Boulevard is going to be a parking lot.
Can I make a comment on that? Since the township did contract with our engineer to obtain this information, it would seem to me that it should be somehow integrated into any plan we make. I mean, we've asked for the data. It's there, it's measurable. And to Mr. Burke's point, to ignore it is, why did we do the study then? We're going to throw up our hands and say there's too much traffic. These are measurable impacts that we're aware of, and I don't know how we do that with the plan in front of us. But
So it's a traffic model. So this is when I've talked about the model. Keystone Engineering ran a baseline model, and then we provided them with information on a theoretical max build out under current zoning. So that was plugged into the model as the 2040. And to me, the biggest, Cedar Crest is a parking lot based on that. Yeah. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway from that exercise was the concept of directing development where future improvements can be required to help improve areas that basically improve areas that are going to be severely impacted by traffic. So PennDOT has the ability to require the length of Cedar Crest, any, a development that needs an HOP. In the scoping study, they say how far you need to study, they can make those requirements. If it's along a township road, we're on our own. So I think that's something that, Mr. Burke has brought up. And with the model, it's something that when we get to the new future land use, we provide them with a build out based on that to see if there's any areas that, particularly with Township Road, State Road intersections, if there's anything that gets flagged as part of that, it's an opportunity for us to take a step back and look at it and say, well, maybe this area isn't the best area for development, or put in some different measures to mitigate that potential issue. So we will be going back to the model once we kind of get through these recommendations and into land use, because the model is geographic and we kind of need to figure out where the development's going to, what type of development, where and what types of development are going to go before we can provide those inputs.
And that needs to connect to the capital improvements plan, because even though PennDOT, for example, is responsible for helping us with Cedar Crest for developments there, so many of our township roads feed off of it, and it impacts the ripple effect. So as a township, yes, we are going to see improvements on that state road, but we've got to look at what impact to the township for all of those other areas, and how do we sensibly and responsibly move forward with this, knowing there's a price tag to the township for this. That all needs to be integrated. I don't envy you to pull all this together, but it's difficult to look at all these recommendations and these different comments because, in a sense, they cannot stand on their own, and we can't pick three because they are all important, and we've probably missed a handful of them that we didn't identify tonight. So it's not an easy thing to
No, and
talk about traffic, but
yeah, and the point of these workshops is for us to get your input, and then we, based on our professional experience, take it all together and see what's important and come back to you with recommendations. And with regards to the model and traffic impact studies, I think having the model, and we'll have to figure out how best to incorporate it, but having the model and requiring traffic impact studies can go into those models is going to give us more information. I've been probably said it several times, but our job is to provide as much information to the boards so that they can make educated decisions. The model and traffic impact studies are some of that information that's going to help make decisions, whether it's for capital improvement plans or traffic impact fees. It all weaves together, and there's a lot of moving pieces.
And then please don't think that the ones that didn't get a check mark by it, for example, number 12, increase citizen education around transportation. Don't think that because no one here voted for it means it'll be left out. It will be included. We're just looking for your highest priorities so we get a handle on what should be emphasized most.
A question I have, and I'm trying not to get too much into the weeds, but piggybacking on the traffic study regarding Cedar Crest, would it, and I don't know what the answer is because that's why I'm asking, but would it be appropriate to incorporate that into a township official map? Then does that open us up for potential funding opportunities, or it communicates to the developer, hey, this road's congested, the township recognizes it needs improvements. I know that the developers will know that.
So
To have it on a map.
The model is a tool, and we can, because it's a model, we can put in different scenarios. One of those could be a connection. Like if we see, and it's a great way to evaluate some of the things, the connectors that we'll put on the official map. We can run it through the model and see, what kind of improvements we see. If we put in the connector on north on the north side of Cedar Crest, the Mauchunk, what impacts are we going to see on the south end of Cedar Crest? So I think incorporating that model in the decision-making process is valuable.
I'll give you a couple examples where I really feel working with the developer with a state road helped. One was the Roots Farm, where you added turn lanes onto Walbert Avenue that you didn't have before, and where there were pinch points, we widened them. It also helped with the stormwater on Walbert Avenue. It hasn't washed out once since that development went in, and it was a huge problem. It almost washed a couple houses away. The other is going to be the impact that Ridge has on that intersection at Walbert. Certainly when you're heading east and you want to go north onto Cedar Crest Boulevard, where there's another pinch point where that developer has the ability to give the extra land up to widen the road, because on the other side is an existing residential subdivision on this end, a commercial development on this end. So Coase has the ability to give room on all his side of the road to widen that road. And really widening Cedar Crest is the ultimate key to its, whenever it's going to happen. But you have to take a whole bunch of right of way going up Cedar Crest Boulevard and widen, put turn lanes in so that people can maneuver around other people. So again, if you go to that north of the ridge, unfortunately, the railroad trestle is what kills everything in the entire process of Cedar Crest. And until that gets fixed, but the ability then north of that would be that you have the ability to widen, put many turn lanes, as much as you want to do, and the storm infrastructure to handle downstream. I think the Roots Farm is a perfect example of how it actually improved that corridor.
I personally want to thank you for that. So often in planning commission, I hear people come out and say, oh, we're developing that land. Now we're going to get more stormwater. And it's very difficult to explain to people that that's actually the opposite of what will happen.
I've used that as an example in other townships. And it was a stormwater. I mean, it's hard for someone to believe I'm going to throw 250 homes on a side of a hill and there's going to be less water after than there is today. But that's a perfect example of how it worked out perfectly.
Yeah. I go.
Yeah. We're getting up
We're
against
down to
it.
23 minutes. So
one thing we talked about some of the safety, and Chief Dorney's here. I think just an overview of some of the data that might be available, that we can incorporate into the planning process. I don't know if you want to mention anything, or I mean, we've talked about speed data and how that could get incorporated. The crash data is something else that can incorporate and leverage a lot of the work that the police department's doing and cataloging, collecting all the data.
The crash data from 2020 and 2021 is kind of scary. If you look at a heat map of South Whitehall, just because of the volume or speed of traffic during the pandemic, severity of accidents and injuries. Granted, a lot of the heat is at Tillman and 309, which is being improved.
Yeah.
So I say to officers all the time, you should have a substation at the trivet and they could just walk out and do the reports. But that's a valuable tool. I mean, our goal is to have a police officer never go to an accident. Realistically, driver behavior dictates a lot of accidents, but if we can do something about the design of a road that's causing the same, and I have access to his police reports, you have to get special clearance, but you can see if it's a sun glare issue, if it's geometry, or if it's driver, hey, everything's happening a mile from this bar. There's certain aspects, but is it a geometry or design issue, or is it driver? You can't help drivers.
I mean, data is key for us. If we can get that data We have a great working relationship with Cedar Crest College. They've actually imported our crash data and done a study for us to map it out, do the heat maps, just like PennDOT would do. And it gives us the ability to look at targeted areas where we want to enforce more to try to get that cooperation from our motorists. So anything that comes out of this comp plan and some of the studies that you incorporate, that data will be very helpful for us to target our enforcement to get compliance. You know, our job is not to give tickets, it's to get compliance. So a lot of the data that we do, and Brian's been very helpful with us with getting speed studies for us, certain roadways. We have covert boxes that we put out to do our own speed studies, but they're clearly not as accurate as what you have. We can't tell what type of vehicles are going by. We do put the speed boards out. They do calm traffic. They're successful, but one of the things we find with that is as soon as one goes up somewhere, we get about 40 requests for them outside of somebody else's house. So we do try to move those around. They're not the cheapest thing in the world. But if we can certainly target areas based on data would be huge for us. So that's kind of what I'm here for, to try and whatever you do that we get out of some of these studies and the plans that we move forward, safety is our number one goal in my aspect. And if we can get the data to determine what is the cause, when we look for causation, anything we could do to mitigate those factors is best for us.
If we can implement or put more tools in the toolbox, speed boards, traffic counters that do classification, speed counts, it's all stuff that we can bake in here, and you could actually get grants for that if it's written somewhere. You got to document that you need it. You know, the hazard mitigation plan that we talked about at the last meeting or two ago, you got to show that you really want it and put it down in paper. And I know you have a wish list that I could imagine, you know.
It's sounding like a municipal traffic safety plan is something that could come out as a recommendation.
And you could even incorporate it as a Parkland regional transportation plan.
And yeah,
You have Upper Macungie, I know we work well. You have the state police in North Whitehall. Everything's connected. Everybody,
that might be
the article in the paper today about the motorcycles going down Tillman.
That was on 78.
They're getting close.
And actually, an interesting part of that, and this could kind of dovetail into that with some of the state legislation that just came out about the dirt bike task. Well, part of that is only focused on third class cities and boroughs. And here we are, a first class township that borders a third class city, third largest in the state of Pennsylvania, which is inundated with the issues that we're facing. We personally met with the state legislators trying to get them to implement that law to also incorporate first class townships. That was not successful at this point. But one of the factors with that, they just had an operation out at one of the hotels, and those dirt bikes were blocking a police car that was transporting a police officer who laced open their arm in a struggle with somebody out of the hotel from their thumb all the way up to their bicep. They were essentially bleeding out, had to put a tourniquet on. Police car threw him in a police car, or a police officer threw him in a police car to drive him to the hospital. And about 20 to 30 of those motorcycles impeded their ability to even get to the hospital to do that. So it is an absolute problem. And that's something, like you said, if we incorporate those things into studies and have that data to be able to show that, that's more leverage for us to go get some of the legislation that we need to be able to make sure that our communities stay safe.
And part of that is documenting what safety features we have out there now. I know PennDOT used to have a sign department. It's kind of been cut back considerably. Sometimes I know there's a stretch on Chapman's Road where the Chevron signs, there's been accidents there. The signs are taken out and they're not replaced. So I'm sure Herb for our township roads, but at least have aware of what safety features are out there, need to be replaced. You can make a call to PennDOT and get them replaced. So it's all about documentation of what your needs are.
One of the things I know we've talked about is, the speed bumps, traffic calming, and technology's changing. It seems like they're improving. I know Lower Macungie has some interesting ones. I forget the name of the road, but that are not as, I don't think as difficult for snowplows. But is that something that we're going to look at in our plan for some of the roads where there's habitual complaints for speeding to help with traffic calming?
So we happen to have a traffic calming policy draft that went to prior board. And that's actually when we get into multimodal, we can kind of talk about pedestrian safety. And traffic calming is a big piece of that. Speed humps, chicanes, and all of that is part of traffic calming. So that's something we can certainly bring in. And that actually might be a good call out, is the concept of traffic calming, road diets.
And that's where the local technical assistance program can help a lot.
So they actually helped a lot with that plan policy document. Pat Wright, after he came out to Dillon Drive. So I think just another comment with regard to the safety plan, where maybe an opportunity to start some of the multi-municipal planning on a very specific topic, because transportation is like watersheds. They ignore boundaries. So that might be a really good opportunity for us. I know we have a good working relationship with Upper Macungie, so it may be an opportunity. Because we're under 15 minutes left.
I was just going to say that.
I think the concept of multimodal, there's a ton of goals from the plans and from future LV. I think we can just go through and get priorities or topics or things that you want to look at, talk about, or things for us to consider when we start putting all of this together. Rather than going through all of it, just go around and see if there's any hot topics, I guess is the best way. Start with Trevor, or should we scooch down one and start with Mark? Then come back to
No, it's fine. I don't mind starting off the multimodal. So just looking at the future LV goals. Number one, promoting safe routes to schools and playgrounds. I think that should be a priority for the township. I reflect on the Tillman and Parkway area, especially Parkway Manor. While the sidewalk was put in on the frontage of the elementary school to connect all the way up to Tillman, there's a couple neighborhoods across the street from the school, and there's no yield for a pedestrian sign in the center line. People that want to get from the school to the park in the neighborhood, or the neighborhood to the school for children, making sure that there's crosswalks in appropriate places or yield to pedestrian signs so people don't have to go across Parkway, which can be a highly traveled road. Then I think to Tillman Street, when you take a left to head towards the city of Allentown, towards the Wegmans, there's a sidewalk on one side of the street, and you'd have to cross back over Tillman, back on the sidewalk to continue frontage of businesses. And I don't know the history of those businesses, but looks like there's right of way there on both sides to connect to each sidewalk. But I think about making sure that we actually connect certain things like that, especially on the older parts of the township, or the more developed parts of the township that were developed earlier. That's probably my number one thing, improving walkability and really safe routes. If we want people to walk and bike, we should make sure they actually can.
Yeah, I think gaps in sidewalks is something that we're starting to look at and pay more attention to with sidewalk deferrals. And there's a policy in the works for the BOC to adopt, and for us to follow a procedure when we call in these sidewalks. Looking at gaps is exactly part of it.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Trevor, you brought up a topic that I was curious about, the pedestrian crosswalks. Certain municipalities actually have signs that say state law stop for pedestrians. The new Regency development here, there's a lot of people that cross Wilbert Avenue. Nobody stops. Is that something, that initiative that the township can look at more frequently used crosswalks and get signs to put up to begin to educate the community that pedestrians, if there's a painted crosswalk, it is a state law that you need to stop and allow them to cross?
We can certainly look into it, and I think the idea of how to prioritize and study and figure out where those big crosswalks are is a piece of it. But also, Walbert's a state road, so we have to work with PennDOT on part of that. But the whole safe routes, and we talked about funding, there's a lot of grants available for signage and connectivity and exactly that. So I think part of the comp plan is to identify those concepts and then build something that we can use for grant applications and say, look, here's our hotspots, here's what we want to do. That's kind of the point of a comp plan, is you can point to it as saying, this is our reference document.
Well, to Trevor's point, I'm sorry, I just want to mention, he brought up a school crossing. That's certainly something that I think we should certainly start with. Safe playground and school connectivity. So thank you.
Yellow lights and white me up. On Dorney, on Hamilton Boulevard, I get it, it's state road, but been on Ocean City, Maryland, almost like every stop sign has blinking lights because people are crossing, and it doesn't matter if the light's green or not, they cross and you have to stop. And yeah, it's just that particular corridor where you have a 50 some mile an hour highway, and that's posted, whatever they're doing could be 65, and then we have people darting across the road there. Yeah, and I think Walbert's another good. Kids that are walking down to Target and doing those things from Country Crossing and places where flashing well-defined crosswalks that people should go up to cross over rather than just cross at any given spot.
And that could be, I feel, could be built into a capital improvements plan as well. So it could be budgeted and funded. And at the same time, I believe there has to be traffic studies done to justify it. And I don't think you can just, these are great places, but other locations, you can't just place one and say, because I want one there. I think there has to be
You need the data
studies.
to support it.
And PennDOT, I think, gets involved with, if there's any signals and flashing beacons, even if it's a township road, PennDOT gets involved.
There's an electrical permit.
And
It's amazing.
we talk about traffic counts and that sort of, measuring traffic. Measuring pedestrians is hard. There's not like a counter we can just put out. And so it's a lot of anecdotal evidence, or just people are observing. And I think one of the things is looking at multimodal and pedestrian connectivity specifically. Is one thing that I can see a recommendation coming out of this. LVPC just did their walk roll plan, so it's a multimodal plan specifically. Something that a township can do is look at specific high, unfortunately, the data that we get is pedestrian struck. So it's a car pedestrian conflict. And we want to try and get ahead of that. You don't want that to happen. So looking at it specifically, to me, is very important. And something that I hope to build into these recommendations. We're down to 5 minutes. So,
Can I ask a
think-
question about something that's not on here? For Atlanta bus stops, some of the more frequently used ones, I don't know if there's a program for it to have covered bus stops for people, because some of them are literally right on the edge of the road over here by the Target, where people are almost standing in the road, all kinds of weather. I mean, is there a way that we as a township can work with Atlanta to put in a more substantial, more safe and protected area for people who are, we're building Ridge Farm across the street. You're going to have more pedestrian traffic, people wanting to take a bus to go places.
Yep.
That's off-site for them, but.
So I'm happy to hear you say that. Working with Lanta, we have a great relationship with Lanta. We had tried to get a shelter at the Target on
The west side,
the other side.
where they use the
Yeah,
shopping
by the
carts to
Weiss,
sit
by
on.
the Weiss.
Yes.
But there were great issues in elevation and utility issues. So unfortunately, that's always part of it. But the idea of looking at some of Lanta's frequent stops and potentially whether it's township or we partner with Lanta and have some sort of shelter program is something that we can certainly begin to discuss. The other piece with regards to the connectivity is looking at bus stops and how the pedestrian circulation from those stops. So there's a lot of new development that are employment centers, and how do public transit riders get that last mile is all, the term that's always thrown around is after you get off the bus, how do you get from the bus stop to work? And something that will definitely try and incorporate in any multimodal conversations.
The unfortunate situation with Lanta is they have limited funding, so the covered shelters, they do have budgets and do have some in stock, but it's very limited.
The biggest detriment to installing those is getting the right of way to install them correctly and to make them accessible for all users. And, you would think that for ADA, you would want it at ground level, but for a bus, you actually need it at ground level to get them up to a step so they can get into the bus. The buses kneel down, but they don't go all the way to the ground. So it's very complicated. And I see it, and I know the chief knows exactly where it's the employees at Dorney Park on both sides of Hamilton Boulevard. They're hanging out. They're crossing Hamilton. There's no crosswalk, and they're waiting for a bus near a post. And it infuriates me every time I see that's how we treat transit riders. And it's not just South Wales, it's across the country.
Yeah, I think you can get those depending on the area. Fairly easy from a developer. I know I've actually committed to one up in all places, Lehigh Township.
Yeah.
But again, it gets complicated when you talk.
Ridge Farm
handicap
that
accessibility.
was a big sticking point with Ridge Farm is making sure there was a Lanta stop. It was in all the comment letters and brought up at all the meetings. So they're putting in a pretty substantial stop there.
And that dovetails into a sidewalk pedestrian network. The warehouses by me, they're a mile from the closest bus stop. I see guys walking, and girls, walking on Hausman, Crackersport Road. They'll either go to 309 or they'll go to Coonsville. And that's a long walk, a mile, in all weather. You know, for transit, it's the last quarter mile. People will walk a quarter mile. After that, they're like, do I need to put a bike on the front of the bus? And they do that now. And but it's also part of land use of putting these centers. And, you know, I doubt that the warehouses will have enough employees that justifies a transit route down Eck Road. So that's why I was such an advocate for calling in the deferrals on the sidewalks on Crackersport, because it's, anytime you get a pedestrian off the road, it's safer, even if it's incrementally. So I could go to midnight on this subject. Come on.
We're at 9 o'clock. Um, So one thing we can do, if you're interested, we can set up a Mentimeter to do another. We can send out the link, and you can prioritize it if you want us to do that, because we didn't even get into the traffic. So we can do that for multimodal and traffic. We'll send out a link for those. Yeah, because there's a ton of them. Public engagement, I don't know if you want to touch on some of the latest things that we've talked about, just real quick for 5 minutes, so we're not too long.
Sure. So I think the last meeting we also got to this point and did a quick rundown of the public engagement strategy, but to bring folks up to speed, and I think to speak to the timeline that Dave shared at the beginning in terms of the topics that are being reviewed and what's going to subsequently be published on the website. What we intend to do is, once we have all the subject areas, so upon the August meeting when the commissioners will approve the transportation language that will then get posted, we want to launch a engagement campaign to drive traffic to be able to see the 5 areas of comp plan goals and strategies and implementation mechanisms, to begin to socialize that this is coming out, and then to lay the groundwork for the series of public meetings, or I think we're calling it the road show, that will happen mid to late September in partnership with the school district at various schools. So I think, and I don't know if that's too high level, but basically what we want to launch in this time, about a month from now, will be a multifaceted on social media, hopefully utilizing the web email list that we have, the website, as well as print media, to get folks to where the recommendations are located on the website, and there are comment forms there, get the comments. There's also some early events that staff has identified, I think including National Night Out and a few open houses at the schools in late August. So we will go to those and also not only share the work that has been done thus far, but also promote the series of public meetings that will be happening mid to late September. And at those meetings is where we'll present the entirety of the draft plan for the public to digest, understand, ask questions, and also correspond with the public comment period.
I just had a quick question. If we're going to be out at night out or open houses, obviously the people outside of South Whitehall who frequent those, will we be targeting our audience to getting feedback from South Whitehall residents or businesses so that it's unique to South Whitehall?
I think with regards to the open houses, we would target the elementary schools that are serve South Whitehall. And then, if we do go to the high school or the middle school, we'll certainly, it'll be clear that it's for South Whitehall. You know, we'll be advertising or talking about it, and there'll be signage and that is South Whitehall residents. So, yeah.
All right, agenda item 6.
What's 6?
All right, guess we'll move fast forward to 10. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
I do just want to say thank you all for keeping transportation and traffic at a high level. I was concerned and worried that we'd get into very details of specific intersections and specific road conditions. So thank you for keeping it at that higher level comp plan. So thank you.
Well, thank you all.